Hello. We have presented in another video the VRIN model of Barney, 1991, in which the resources creating firms' sustainable competitive advantage must be valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable. Today, we would like to return on this theme by discussing, but in another point of view of Grant, 1991, the characteristics of resources and capabilities that create sustainable competitive advantage for the firm. In resource-based theory, the resources and capabilities are identified the foundation for the competitive advantage of the firm on the basis of two premises. First, internal resources and capabilities provide the basic direction for a firm's strategy. Second, resources and capabilities are the primary source of profit for the firm. Also, 6 major categories of resource have been distinguished, including financial resources, physical resources, human resources, technological resources, reputation, and organizational resources. These resources are inputs into the production process. They are the basic units of analysis. The individual resources of the firm include items of capital equipment, skills of individual employees, patents, brand names, finance, and so on. But on their own, few resources support the sustainability of competitive advantage. In this point of view, the resource-based theory point towards 4 characteristics of resources and capabilities, which are likely to be particularly important determinants of the sustainability of competitive advantage. According to Grant in his article published in 1991 on California Management Review, these characteristics are durability, transparency, transferability, and replicability. Specifically, the durability means that how long until a resource becomes obsolete or depreciate. In the absence of competition, the longevity of a firm's competitive advantage depends upon the rate at which the underlying resources and capabilities depreciate or become obsolete. The durability of resources varies considerably. The increasing pace of technological change is shortening the useful lifespans of most capital equipment and technological resources. On the other hand, reputation appears to depreciate relatively slowly, and these assets can normally be maintained by modest rates of replacement investment. Secondly, if a firm wishes to imitate the strategy of a rival, it must first establish the capabilities which underlie the rival's competitive advantage, and then it must determine what resources are required to replicate these capabilities. Grant refers to this as the transparency of competitive advantage. Such transparency means that the firm's ability to sustain its competitive advantage over time depends upon the speed with which other firms can imitate its strategy. With regard to the first transparency problem, a competitive advantage, which is the consequence of superior capability in relation to a single performance variable, is more easy to identify and comprehend than a competitive advantage that involves multiple capabilities conferring superior performance across several variables. With regard to the second transparency problem, a capability, which requires a complex pattern of coordination between large numbers of diverse resources, is more difficult to comprehend than a capability which rests upon the exploitation of a single dominant resource. Imperfect transparency is the basis of uncertain imitability. The greater the uncertainty within a market over how successful companies do it, the more inhibited are potential entrants, and the higher the level of profit that established firms can maintain within that market. The third characteristic of resources and capabilities, which are likely to be particularly important determinants of the sustainability of competitive advantage, concerns its transferability. Firm can proceed resources and capacities necessary for a competitive challenge in the markets for these inputs. However, most resources and capabilities are not freely transferable between firms. Imperfections in transferability arise from several sources as follows. The geographical immobility implies the costs of relocating large items of capital equipment and highly specialized employees. The imperfect information implies the difficulty for assessing the value of a resource because of the heterogeneity of resources, particularly human resources, and by imperfect knowledge of the potential productivity of individual resources. The firm-specific resources are, for example, reputation or human resources. an employee's productivity is influenced by situational and motivational factors, then it is unreasonable to expect that a highly successful employee in one company can replicate his or her performance when hired away by another company. The immobility of capabilities means that, because capabilities require interactive teams of resources, they are far more immobile than individual resources. They require the transfer of the whole team. The last characteristic of resources and capabilities, which are likely to be particularly important determinants of the sustainability of competitive advantage, consist in its replicability. Theoretically, with the exception of market, a firm can also acquire a resource or capability by internal investment. However, much less easily replaceable are capabilities based upon highly complex organizational routines. Even where replication is possible, the dynamics of stock flow relationships may still offer an advantage to incumbent firms. Competitive advantage depends upon the stock of resources and capabilities that a firm possesses. In practice, firms, which possess the initial stocks of the resources required for competitive advantage, may be able to sustain their advantages over time. They are, firstly, the asset mass efficiencies, or the initial amount of the resource which the firm possesses influences the pace at which the one resource can be accumulated, and secondly, they are time compression diseconomies, which means that firms which rapidly accumulate a resource incur disproportionate costs. In conclusion, the resources and capabilities of a firm are the central considerations in creating sustainable competitive advantage for the firm. They are the primary constants upon which a firm can establish its identity and frame its strategy, and they are the primary sources of the firm's profitability. This contributes as foundation of the resource-based view of competitive advantage, especially for strategy formulation in resource-based approach. We finish here the presentation. Thanks for your views and subscription to our channel. And see you in the next video.